The humid evening air of Victoria Island carried the faint scent of rain and exhaustion. Streetlights blinked lazily over the half-empty road as Tianna Anderson hurried toward the bus stop, her backpack clutched tightly against her chest. Her heart thudded beneath her blouse, but not from the long walk, it was from fear. Hours ago, she had been in class at Lagos Metropolitan University, distracted by the sound of her buzzing phone. The hospital's number flashed on the screen. When she answered, the nurse's tone made her blood run cold. "Your mother's condition has worsened. Please come quickly." Those words still echoed in her head as she reached the hospital's reception desk. Her mother, her only family, was all she had left in the world. Since her father's death years ago, it had been just the two of them, fighting through life's storms. She ran down the stark white corridor, her shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Inside the ward, her mother lay pale and weak, her breathing slow and uneven. The doctor, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, stepped forward, removing his glasses. "Miss Anderson," he began gently, "your mother's heart condition has reached a critical stage. She needs urgent medication, imported drugs, special care, constant monitoring. Without it, I'm afraid she may not make it through the week." Tiana's throat tightened. "How much?" 200,000 naira, he replied softly, "and we must act fast." 200,000. The number crashed through her mind like thunder. She barely had enough to pay rent, let alone such a staggering sum. Her scholarship payment had been delayed for months, and her cleaning and tutoring jobs paid next to nothing. That night, as the city lights blurred outside the hospital window, Tianna sat by her mother's bedside, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. "Please, Mama," she whispered, holding her hand. "You can't leave me now. I'll find the money, I promise." But where could she go? Her first stop was Mr. Harris, a notorious local moneylender known for helping students in tight corners. Though help was too generous a word. His cramped office sat at the back of a dusty complex, the air heavy with cigarette smoke. He looked up from his ledger as Tianna entered, his lips curling into a smirk. "So, Miss Anderson," he said lazily, tapping his pen against the desk. "You want a loan of 200,000? What do you have as collateral?" Tiana's hands trembled. "Please, sir, my mother is in the hospital. I'll pay little by little. I just need to save her." Harris leaned back in his chair, chuckling. "Pretty girls like you always come here with tears and promises. Your kind never pay back. I'm running a business, not charity." "Please, sir," he cut her off with a wave of his hand. "You're lucky I don't charge you for wasting my time." Humiliation burned through her. She stood slowly, blinking back tears, and walked out to the street. The city buzzed around her, cars honking, people laughing, lights glowing from restaurant windows, but she felt completely alone. She had no one left to ask. Her classmates were struggling too, and her distant relatives had long stopped answering her calls. By the time she reached the pharmacy near Adeola Odaku Street, the night was deep and heavy. Her last few thousand naira were folded neatly in her palm. "Just something small for pain and fever," she told the cashier, her voice barely steady. The young man scanned the items and asked for her card. She swiped it, praying silently. Beep. "Insufficient funds." She tried again. Beep. Same message. A few people in line sighed impatiently. The cashier's tone sharpened. "Miss, please step aside if you can't pay." Tiana's face flushed with embarrassment. She opened her mouth to explain, but before she could speak, a calm male voice from behind said, "Add her items to mine. I'll cover it." She turned. The man who stood behind her was unlike anyone she had ever seen up close. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored navy suit that looked effortless on him. His presence was quiet but commanding, like someone who had never been denied anything in life. His eyes met hers briefly, calm, assessing, and then he turned back to the cashier. "Put it all on my bill," he said simply. The cashier nodded quickly. Within seconds, the transaction was done. Tianna clutched the small paper bag of medicine, her throat thick with emotion. Outside, under the dim glow of the pharmacy's lights, she found him leaning against a sleek black car, scrolling through his phone. The air smelled faintly of cologne and rain. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." He looked up briefly, his expression unreadable. "Don't bother. Just take care of whoever those are for." She hesitated. "Still, I wish I could return the favor somehow." A small smile tugged at his lips. "You don't need to, but if you ever really need help, call this number." He handed her a card. It was sleek, white, embossed with gold lettering, Jeffery Group Holdings. Christian Jeffery. She read quietly. The name was familiar. The Jeffery Group owned half of Lagos Skyline. Real estate, tech, finance, oil. People like him existed in a world far removed from hers. Before she could say another word, a man approached from the car. "Sir, we should go." Christian nodded, gave her one last look, and got into the car. The black vehicle glided away, leaving Tianna standing alone in the halo of the streetlight, her heart pounding with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She looked down at the card in her hand. The letters gleamed faintly under the light. That night, she sat by her mother's hospital bed again, clutching her phone and whispering prayers. Every call she made for help ended in disappointment. She had nothing left but that small card, and the faint memory of a man whose world was made of everything she'd been denied. Then, just past midnight, her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. We met earlier at the pharmacy. If you need help, come to the lounge at the Eko Signature Hotel tomorrow. One night, no strings, any amount you ask for." Tianna froze. Her chest tightened, shame flooding through her. She stared at the message, her hands trembling. How could someone who seemed so kind send something so cruel? She locked her phone and pushed it away, but the words burned into her mind. One night, no strings. By 2 a.m., she was still awake. The air conditioner hummed softly in the hospital ward. Her mother's breathing was shallow, each rise of her chest a battle. Tianna pressed her palms to her eyes. "I can't," she whispered. But then another thought came, darker, desperate. "If I don't, she'll die." Her tears fell silently. Finally, with trembling fingers, she unlocked her phone and typed a short reply. "Tianna, I'll come tomorrow." She placed the phone on the table beside her and rested her head on her mother's hand. Her body shook with quiet sobs, the weight of what she had agreed to sinking into her soul. Outside, the city never slept. Somewhere across town, in a penthouse overlooking the lagoon, Christian Jeffery stared at the same screen, his jaw tight with conflict. To him, it had started as an impulsive test. Nothing more. But something in her eyes at that pharmacy had lingered longer than he cared to admit. Tomorrow their worlds would collide again, and neither would ever be the same. The next evening arrived too quickly. The city glowed in gold and silver as dusk fell over Victoria Island. The streets around Eko Signature Hotel shimmered with headlights and laughter. The sound of wealth, of people who had never known desperation. But for Tianna Anderson, every light felt like judgment. She stood outside the hotel entrance in a plain navy dress, her hands trembling as she adjusted her purse strap. The towering building loomed above her, its glass facade reflecting the neon of passing cars. She had never stepped into a place like this before. The marble floors, the polished cars, the men in suits, it all screamed a world she didn't belong to. Her mother's face flashed through her mind, pale, weak, dying. That thought gave her courage. She walked inside. The scent of sandalwood and expensive cologne hung in the air. A receptionist smiled professionally. "Good evening, ma'am. How may I help you?" I'm here to see Mr. Christian Jeffery," Tianna managed to say. The woman's eyes flickered in recognition. "Of course, he's expecting you." She gestured toward the elevator. "Private lounge, top floor." As Tianna rode the elevator up, her reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls. Young, nervous, pretending to be strong. She whispered under her breath, "This isn't who you are, but it's for Mama. Just one night, Tianna. One night, then it's over." When the doors opened, a man in a dark suit guided her down a quiet hallway to a door guarded by 2 attendants. He nodded once, opened it, and stepped aside. The room beyond was like something out of a dream. The lights were low, casting a warm amber glow across velvet chairs and sleek glass tables. The city stretched out beyond the wide windows, the lagoon reflecting the night sky. And there he was, Christian Jeffery, seated on a leather couch, one arm resting on the backrest, the other holding a glass of sparkling water. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You came." Tianna swallowed. "You sent the message." Christian gestured to the seat opposite him. "Sit." She obeyed, sitting stiffly, her fingers twisting together. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet hum of jazz from the corner speaker filled the silence. Finally, Tianna lifted her chin, her voice steady though her heart raced. "I came because I need the money. But there have to be rules." Christian raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Rules?" "Yes," she said firmly. "No violence, no recording, no drugs. You send the full payment, 200,000, before anything happens. And when tonight ends, we both forget it ever did." A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "You're braver than I expected." "I'm desperate, not brave," she whispered. For a long moment, Christian just studied her. Her words carried a quiet dignity that disarmed him. He reached into his jacket, took out his phone, and made the transfer. The alert buzzed on her device seconds later. "It's done," he said quietly. Her throat tightened as she saw the balance. Relief and shame warred inside her. She nodded once. "Thank you." He leaned forward slightly, his tone calm. "No strings, Tianna. You have my word." She blinked, startled that he remembered her name. After a brief pause, he stood. "Let's go." He led her through a short corridor into a private suite. The door closed softly behind them, sealing away the noise of the world. Tiana's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She set her bag down, walking toward the bathroom without looking back. Under the warm shower, she gripped the tiled wall, tears mixing with the water. "Don't think," she told herself. "Just survive this." When she stepped out, her hair damp, she found him waiting by the window, his jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled. He looked at her, not like a man expecting something, but like someone seeing a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You can leave if you've changed your mind," he said quietly. She hesitated, her heart twisting. She thought of her mother again, the machines, the fading breath, the doctor's warning. "No," she said softly. "I'm fine." He took a slow step toward her, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of cedar and rain on his skin. "You don't have to pretend," he murmured. "I'm not pretending." The silence between them grew charged, delicate. Then, without another word, he reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. His touch was careful, almost hesitant, and when his lips found hers, it wasn't the hunger she'd feared. It was something gentler, almost uncertain. Her heart stuttered. The rest of the night unfolded quietly, a blur of emotions she couldn't fully name. Fear, confusion, and something dangerously close to tenderness. When it was over, she turned away, ashamed of her tears. He didn't stop her. At dawn, pale light filtered through the curtains. Tianna stirred, realizing she'd fallen asleep for a moment. Christian sat at the edge of the bed, his gaze distant. For once, he didn't look like a billionaire, just a man lost in thought. She rose quietly, dressed, and picked up her bag. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "No one will ever know," he said softly. She nodded. "Thank you." Before she could reach the door, he spoke again. "Tianna." She paused. "I transferred what you asked for," he said, "but take this as well, for hospital bills, medication, whatever she needs." He held out an envelope. She froze. "No, you've done enough." "It's not charity," he replied. "It's peace of mind." Her throat ached. "I'll pay you back one day." Something flickered in his eyes. "I doubt you'll ever owe me anything." She walked out without another word, her shoes silent on the marble floor. By the time she reached the hospital, the sun had fully risen over Lagos. Nurses hurried past, the smell of antiseptic sharp in the air. Tianna went straight to her mother's ward, her legs weak from exhaustion. She placed the bag of medicine on the bedside table, then sank into the chair beside her mother, clutching her hand. "We'll be okay now, Mama," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You'll get better." Her mother stirred faintly, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Tianna sat there until her eyes grew heavy, her heart heavy with both relief and guilt. She had done the unthinkable, but her mother was safe for now. Across the city, in his penthouse overlooking the lagoon, Christian Jeffery couldn't sleep. He poured himself a glass of water and stared at the skyline, his mind replaying the night. Something inside him refused to settle. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Delete every message, every record of last night. Understand?" "Yes, sir." When he hung up, he sat in silence, his thoughts returning to Tianna's trembling voice, her defiance, her eyes that looked at him without greed. He had assumed she was like everyone else who reached for him because of money. But then, as he'd lain awake hours later, he'd seen the faint stain of blood on the sheet. Realization had hit him like a blow. She had been untouched, innocent in a way he didn't understand. He ran a hand through his hair, the guilt heavy. "What have I done?" he whispered into the empty room. Outside, the first rays of morning light touched the lagoon, turning it gold. Somewhere across the city, Tianna Anderson sat by her mother's side, unaware that the man who had bought her one-night salvation couldn't stop thinking about the woman he could never buy again. 3 weeks passed like a blur. The money Tianna received had covered her mother's treatment and medication, and the doctors said her condition was improving. The relief that came with those words felt like sunlight after endless rain. Yet peace was something Tianna couldn't quite hold. Every time she closed her eyes, memories of that night at the Eko Signature Hotel haunted her. The weight of Christian Jeffery's gaze, the quiet gentleness that didn't match his reputation, and the shame she tried to bury. By day, she attended her final year lectures at Lagos Metropolitan University, keeping her head low, trying to rebuild a sense of normal. By night, she worked extra shifts, tutoring children and cleaning offices around Ikoyi, determined never to let desperation break her again. One Saturday afternoon, as she walked down Ikoyi Road, the sky heavy with the threat of rain, she spotted an elderly woman struggling with several shopping bags. The woman paused near the curb, her breathing shallow. Without thinking, Tianna hurried over. "Let me help you, ma'am," she said softly, taking the heavy bags from her trembling hands. The woman looked up, her eyes sharp but kind. "Ah, my dear, thank you. These hands aren't as strong as they used to be." "It's nothing really," Tianna replied, offering a warm smile. "You shouldn't be carrying this much alone." They walked together for a while, chatting casually. The woman's voice carried a gentle confidence, the kind that came from years of experience. "What's your name, child?" "Tianna. Tianna Anderson." The woman murmured, as if storing it in her mind. "You have good manners. Not many young people stop for strangers anymore." Tianna chuckled. "You reminded me of my mother. She raised me to help anyone who needs it." At the corner, a sleek black car pulled up, the kind that belonged in magazines. A driver stepped out immediately. "Madam Ruth, please, let me take that." Tianna blinked in surprise. "Madam Ruth." The elderly woman turned to her, smiling with genuine warmth. "You've done enough, my dear." "Thank you." "It was my pleasure," Tianna said, handing over the last bag. The woman touched her hand lightly. "You have a good heart, Tianna. May life remember your kindness." Tianna smiled, unaware that the woman she had just helped was none other than Ruth Jeffery, matriarch of the Jeffery family, the grandmother of the man whose shadow still lingered in her heart. Days later, Tianna visited a small boutique in Victoria Island to look for something simple yet professional for her upcoming final year project presentation. The boutique sparkled with crystal lights and expensive fabrics, and the air smelled faintly of rose perfume. She knew most of the clothes were far beyond her budget, but she hoped to find something modest she could afford. The moment she stepped in, the sales attendants exchanged looks. One of them whispered, not softly enough, "These campus girls will come here to window shop. They never buy anything." Tianna ignored the sting of their words and quietly browsed the racks. She picked a plain white blouse and a pencil skirt to try on. When she came out of the fitting room, their giggles grew louder. "She doesn't belong here," one muttered. Tianna kept her head high. "I'll take this one," she said, though her voice shook slightly. Before the attendant could reply, the boutique doors opened, and a familiar voice floated through the air. "Ah, there you are." Tianna turned and froze. It was the elderly woman from Eko Road, dressed elegantly in a soft lavender wrapper and gold jewelry that spoke of quiet power. The attendants straightened instantly, their tones shifting from mockery to admiration. "No, good afternoon, Ma," they chorused. Madame Ruth smiled. "Afternoon, but first," her eyes narrowed as she looked from Tianna to the embarrassed attendants. "Is this how you treat customers? You don't know who God might send into your life?" The room went silent. The women lowered their heads in shame. Ruth turned to Tianna, her face softening. "You helped me the other day. I told myself I wouldn't forget your kindness. What a pleasant surprise to meet you again." Tiana's mouth fell open. "Ma, I didn't expect—" "Hush," Ruth said with a smile. "Take whatever you tried on. In fact, take a few more pieces that fit. I'll pay for everything." "No, Ma, please, you don't have to." "Nonsense. You did something good when no one was watching. Let me do the same." By the time they left the boutique, Tianna carried a small bag of new clothes and a heart full of gratitude. At the door, Ruth handed her a card, white with embossed gold lettering. "Come for an interview tomorrow morning at Jeffery Group Holdings," she said. "You strike me as someone who will fit perfectly in a company that values hard work." Tianna stared at the card, her heart leaping. "Jeffery Group?" she whispered. Ruth smiled knowingly. "Yes, my grandson's company. Don't be nervous, just be yourself." The next morning, Tianna stood in front of the Jeffery Group headquarters, a glass tower that reflected the skyline of Victoria Island. The building looked like it touched the clouds. Her palms were clammy, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. Inside, everything gleamed: polished marble floors, crisp suited employees, and the faint hum of efficiency. She followed the receptionist's directions to the top floor, whispering a silent prayer for courage. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a wide hallway of glass and silver. A secretary guided her to a conference room. "Mr. Jeffery will see you shortly," she said. Tiana's stomach dropped. "Mr. Jeffery?" When the boardroom door opened, she saw him, Christian Jeffery, seated at the head of the long glass table. Time seemed to stop. Their eyes met, and everything inside her stilled. He froze too, his expression flickering between shock and restraint. The professional mask slipped briefly, revealing recognition. Then just as quickly, it returned. "Miss Anderson," he said evenly, "please have a seat." Her throat felt dry. "Thank you, sir." The interview began with questions about accounting principles, time management, and ethics. Christian's tone was sharp but fair, as though testing her resolve. She answered carefully, forcing herself to focus. When he asked, "How would you handle pressure in a corporate environment?" she met his gaze and said, with honesty and composure, "Pressure reveals who we truly are, not who we pretend to be." Something in his eyes softened. After the session, he leaned back in his chair. "You're well prepared. Henry will handle your onboarding. Welcome to Jeffery Group, Miss Anderson." Tianna managed a polite smile. "Thank you, sir." When she left the room, her legs nearly gave out. Her first week at the company was a whirlwind. She worked under Henry Cole Christian's trusted deputy, assisting with audits and financial reports. But her presence didn't go unnoticed. Some of her colleagues whispered as she passed. Helen Rivers, a senior analyst from a wealthy family, made no attempt to hide her disdain. "I heard she's here because of Madame Ruth," she sneered to another staffer. "Nepotism wrapped in cheap perfume." Beside her, Cynthia Lane, another trainee, smiled sweetly but watched Tianna with thinly veiled curiosity. Tianna ignored them and threw herself into her work, staying late, double-checking figures, and volunteering for extra tasks. One afternoon, she presented a detailed financial correction that saved the company millions in misallocated expenses. When the board reviewed her report, Christian's eyes lingered on her longer than necessary. Excellent work, he said quietly after the meeting. You've done what half this room failed to notice. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her tone steady. Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job. As she left the boardroom, whispers followed her again, but this time they carried a different tone. For the first time, Christian realized something he hadn't expected. The girl he once pitied was no longer a desperate student begging for help. She was a woman who had stepped into his world and earned her place, not through favors, but through brilliance. And though he tried to look away, he couldn't deny what he felt stirring quietly within him, something deep, something dangerous, something that felt like the beginning of admiration. Weeks passed, and Tianna Anderson was no longer just the quiet intern people whispered about. She was the intern everyone watched. Her work was impeccable. She met deadlines, anticipated challenges, and handled financial audits with precision that even seasoned staff admired. But in an office filled with ambition, excellence often invited envy. At Jeffery Group, holdings power wasn't earned only by performance. It was guarded through politics. And no one understood that better than Helen Cross, a senior analyst from one of Lagos's wealthiest families. Helen had joined the company years ago, believing her charm and pedigree would one day make her Mrs. Jeffery. But lately, Christian's glances toward Tianna during meetings had started to chip at her confidence. Look at her, Helen sneered one afternoon, sipping coffee in the executive lounge. Acting like she belongs here just because Madam Ruth took pity on her. Across from her, Cynthia Bennett, another analyst, smirked. You're overthinking it, Helen. She's harmless, probably still renting a flat with flickering bulbs. Helen's lips tightened. Harmless girls are the dangerous ones. Mark my words, she's playing the long game. Cynthia laughed, but there was an edge to it. Helen leaned closer. Let's give her something she won't recover from. The following week, Tianna's schedule was packed. She was helping prepare a financial summary for the company's board, a critical report tied to multi-million-naira contracts. Christian had asked her to assist Henry personally. It was a huge opportunity, but it also made her a target. That Friday evening, most employees had gone home early, but Tianna stayed behind to complete data backups. Helen appeared at her desk, all charm and authority. Tianna, she said sweetly, make sure you shut down the system when you're done. We can't risk overheating over the weekend. Tianna hesitated. Should I send that in writing, Ma? Just to be sure. Helen's smile faltered for a second, but quickly returned. Oh, how cautious. Fine. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. Make sure you cut the power after the backup. Helen Cross. Satisfied, Tianna nodded. Understood. An hour later, when the upload finished, she followed the instruction, locked up, and left the office. By Monday morning, chaos erupted. The IT department buzzed like a beehive. Screens flashed warnings. Entire folders, containing weeks of critical data, had vanished from the servers. The company's systems had crashed overnight, and panic spread like wildfire. Helen walked in with feigned shock. What happened? An IT staffer stammered. The power was cut during the backup process, Mom. Everything was wiped before completion. Helen's eyes flicked to Tianna, who had just entered, holding a cup of tea. And who handled the shutdown? She asked coolly. The room fell silent. Tianna did, one of the analysts murmured. Helen's voice rose, dripping with outrage. You cut the power? Without permission? Do you realize what you've done? The company could lose millions. Tianna froze. But you told me to. Helen's tone sharpened. Excuse me? You're lying now? I never gave such an instruction. Cynthia stepped forward, clutching her tablet. If she's claiming that, let's see proof. Do you have the message? Tianna fumbled for her phone. She scrolled through her inbox, her heartbeat hammering. The message was gone. Panic surged through her chest. She remembered how Cynthia had picked up her phone that morning, smiling innocently after Tianna dropped it. That was when it must have been deleted. Her voice wavered. It was here. I swear it was. Helen folded her arms. Convenient. You destroy data and then accuse your seniors. Brilliant. Whispers rippled through the office. Someone muttered, she's finished. Tears stung Tianna's eyes, but she stood tall. I'm not lying. There was a message. I asked for confirmation because I didn't want confusion. Helen raised an eyebrow. Then show it. Otherwise, I'll have HR escort you out myself. Minutes later, the conference room filled with tension. Henry entered with a frown. What's going on here? Helen launched into her story, how the new intern had acted carelessly, how she refused accountability, how the company's credibility was at stake. Christian arrived midway through, his presence instantly quieting the room. Explain, he said simply. Helen clasped her hands dramatically. Sir, I instructed her to assist, not to power down the system. She acted on her own. Christian turned to Tianna. Is that true? Tianna's voice was barely a whisper. No, sir. She told me to do it, and even sent a text message to confirm. It's gone now, but Henry cut in. Let's check the CCTV. The hallway cameras record both audio and visuals. Helen stiffened. That won't be necessary. Christian's gaze hardened. Play it. The room darkened as the footage appeared on the wall screen. There was Helen, leaning against Tianna's desk on Friday night, her voice clear. Make sure you cut the power when you're done. Gasps echoed through the room. The recording continued, showing Tianna hesitating, asking for written confirmation, and Helen typing the very message she now denied. And Helen's face drained of color. Christian turned slowly toward her, his jaw tight. You tried to destroy this company's integrity and frame one of our own. Helen stammered. Sir, I didn't mean... His tone sliced through her excuses. You don't mean to sabotage your team, Miss Cross. Effective immediately, you are demoted. Half salary, 6-month probation. Any further misconduct, and you'll be dismissed. The silence in the room was heavy. Christian's next words softened slightly as he faced Tianna. Let this be a lesson, Miss Anderson. Always protect yourself with evidence. The world doesn't always reward truth, but it will remember proof. Tianna nodded, tears threatening again, though this time they were from relief. Thank you, sir. As the crowd dispersed, Cynthia avoided Tianna's eyes, her usual smirk replaced with unease. Helen stood frozen, humiliated, watching Christian's gaze linger on the girl she had tried to destroy. Later that evening, the sun set over the lagoon, painting the sky with shades of amber and violet. Tianna stayed behind to finish her reports, wanting to focus on work instead of the whispers still floating through the office. Christian appeared at the doorway, his tone softer than usual. You've had a long day. She looked up, startled. Sir, I was just... You don't have to explain, he interrupted gently. I know what it's like to be targeted for simply doing what's right. Tianna met his gaze, surprised by the quiet empathy in it. Thank you, she said, for believing me when no one else did. Christian exhaled, his composure slipping for the first time. Belief isn't the right word. I saw the truth, and I couldn't ignore it. For a heartbeat, they stood in silence. Two people from opposite worlds, bound by a moment neither had expected. Then Christian turned to leave. Go home, Tianna. You've earned rest. When he left, Tianna sat back, her chest full of emotions she didn't understand. Gratitude, confusion, maybe something more. But beyond the soft glow of that moment, darker tides were rising. At the upper levels of Jeffery Mansion, Christian's uncle Benjamin and cousin Leo sat in the private study. The room smelled of aged whiskey and resentment. Christian's gotten reckless, Benjamin muttered, pouring himself a drink. He's too soft. That girl has become a distraction. Leo's lips curved into a sneer. Then we'll make sure she's removed, and him with her. Grandma Ruth trusts him too much. We'll remind her who truly deserves this empire. Benjamin raised his glass, his eyes cold. Do it quietly. I won't have Ruth suspecting a thing. Once she's out of the way, the Jeffery name will belong to us again. The two men clinked glasses, sealing their silent conspiracy. Far away in her small apartment, Tianna sat by her window watching the lights of the city flicker against the night. She had survived betrayal once, but she didn't yet know that the real storm, the one that could destroy everything she had worked for, was already gathering, hidden within the walls of the Jeffery family itself. The night rain had barely stopped when Tianna Anderson arrived at the Jeffery mansion. The driver who came to collect her said only that Grandma Ruth had requested her presence, and Tianna obeyed instantly. The air was tense, the kind of stillness that whispered of danger before the storm. She stepped through the large mahogany doors and found Christian Jeffery standing at the base of the staircase, his shirt sleeves rolled, his expression unreadable. "Christian?" she asked softly. He turned to her, his voice low but urgent. "Where's my grandmother?" "In her room. The housekeeper said she hasn't eaten all day." Before Tianna could say more, she noticed the faint tremor in his hand as he held a glass of water. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" Christian's gaze flicked to the hallway. "Leo was here earlier," he said tightly. "He brought her medicine. The supplements look different. I asked him why, and he said the pharmacy changed brands." Her pulse quickened. "Different? How?" "The color. The smell." Tiana's stomach twisted. She remembered overhearing Leo Jeffery on the phone days before, whispering to someone about fixing the old woman's pills. At first she'd brushed it off as paranoia, but now the unease came roaring back. "Christian," she said urgently, "don't let her take them. I think Leo's done something." He froze, his eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" "I overheard him," Tianna whispered. "He said something about changing her supplements. I didn't want to accuse him without proof, but that was all Christian needed to hear." He didn't wait another second. They rushed upstairs. In the soft glow of the bedside lamp, Grandma Ruth was already holding the small bottle of capsules, her hand trembling as she unscrewed the lid. "Ah! Grandma, stop!" Christian shouted. She startled, blinking in confusion. "What is it, child?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, snatching the bottle from her. Tianna stepped beside him, her chest heaving. "These aren't your regular pills," Christian said, his tone shaking with suppressed fury. Ruth frowned, confused. "But Leo brought them. He said they were prescribed." Christian turned to the housekeeper. "Get the doctor, now!" Within minutes, the mansion erupted into movement. The private physician arrived, analyzed the pills, and his face went pale. "These aren't supplements. They're laced with toxic compounds. If she'd taken even one, her system would have collapsed." Ruth gasped. "Dear Lord!" Christian's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the bottle. "Leo," he muttered, his voice raw with rage. He stormed downstairs, his steps echoing like thunder. Tianna hurried after him, heart pounding. In the drawing room, Uncle Benjamin and Leo sat comfortably, sipping brandy as if nothing in the world could touch them. Christian threw the bottle onto the table. "Explain this!" Benjamin's brows rose lazily. "What's that supposed to be?" "Poison," Christian hissed. "The same pills you gave Grandma. You were going to kill her." Leo's smug composure faltered. "You're crazy." "The doctor tested them," Tianna said sharply. "They would have ended her life." The room fell silent. Benjamin's expression hardened. "You're accusing your own blood? Be careful, Christian. Power makes enemies, sometimes even inside your own home." "Don't talk to me about power," Christian growled, stepping forward. "You've spent your life feeding off this family like a parasite. Grandma gave you everything, your company shares, your houses, and this is how you repay her?" Benjamin slammed his glass down. "Watch your tone, boy." Leo stood, but his eyes darted nervously between them. "You can't prove anything." "Oh, I can." Christian's voice dropped to a deadly calm. "The cameras in Grandma's room record 24 hours a day." Leo's face went white. Moments later, the footage played on the living room screen. Leo entering the bedroom quietly the night before, swapping the pill bottle and leaving with a smirk. Ruth, who had come downstairs supported by Tianna, watched silently, tears of heartbreak filling her eyes. "My own grandson," she whispered. "You would have taken my life for money?" Leo dropped to his knees, stammering. "Grandma, I didn't mean..." "Uncle Ben said..." "Enough," Christian snapped. "Security, get them out." As the guards escorted the disgraced men away, Ruth turned to Tianna, her frail hand reaching out. You saved my life, child. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Tianna shook her head quickly. Please don't say that, Ma. I only did what anyone would. But Christian's eyes lingered on her, full of gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. Days later, Jeffery Group Holdings hosted its annual charity gala at the Eko Convention Center. The hall glittered under chandeliers, filled with Lagos's most powerful elite. Cameras flashed as celebrities, investors, and politicians poured in. Tianna, wearing a simple yet elegant silver gown Ruth had gifted her, stood quietly at the side, helping coordinate donations. She wanted the night to go smoothly, unaware that another storm was forming. Helen Cross hadn't forgotten her humiliation. Demoted, ridiculed, and ignored, she had one last card to play. Halfway through the event, just as Christian prepared to address the audience, Helen stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her smile sharp, before we celebrate generosity tonight, perhaps we should question where the donations truly go. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Helen pointed toward Tianna. This woman, the so-called coordinator of the foundation, has been embezzling funds meant for the poor. I have documents to prove it. Gasps filled the hall. Tianna froze, her throat dry. That's a lie, she managed to say. Helen opened a folder dramatically. Fake invoices, altered receipts, see for yourselves. Before Christian could intervene, Tianna stepped forward, her voice shaking but steady. If you're accusing me, then show proof. But before that, I'll show mine. She held up her phone, connecting it to the projector. Receipts appeared on the screen, digital logs, transaction records, supplier verifications. Each matched perfectly. Every naira is accounted for, she said firmly. Every food pack, every school kit, every donation. The murmurs grew uncertain. Helen's confident smile began to fade. Then Christian rose from his seat, his voice cutting through the noise. You're right, Helen. We should question honesty tonight. He signaled toward the back. The ballroom doors opened. A group of elderly women and children entered, carrying the supplies Tianna had distributed under the company's charity drive. Behind them came welfare directors and NGO partners. One by one, they spoke. The Jeffery Foundation gave us food, clothing, textbooks, all under Miss Tianna's management. Helen's folder slipped from her hands. Christian's tone turned to steel. The real forgeries are yours, Helen. You hacked files and planted false claims. Security found your fingerprints all over the falsified documents. Helen stammered. No, I was told to... By Leo, Christian finished coldly, and both of you will answer for it. The hall fell silent as security approached her. Cameras flashed again, but this time the story had changed. Tianna's name was cleared before the entire elite of Lagos. When the crowd erupted into applause, Tianna stood frozen, tears glimmering in her eyes. Christian looked at her, pride softening his features. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights dimmed, Tianna slipped outside for air. The skyline of Eko Atlantic stretched before her, gold and blue lights shimmering across the water. Christian found her there, his tie undone, his expression weary but open. You were incredible tonight, he said softly. I only did what was right, she murmured. He stepped closer. You always do, even when it costs you. The silence between them grew heavy, charged with something that had been building for months. The wind tugged at her hair as he looked into her eyes. I hate how we began, Christian said quietly, but I can't live pretending I don't love you. Tianna's breath caught. Her heart pounded painfully. Christian. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle, reverent. You've changed everything I believed about people, about love, about redemption. You're the only truth I have left. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, I'm scared. So am I, he admitted. But maybe that's what love really is, the courage to stay after the storm. The wind carried their silence across the glowing city, and beneath the lights of Eko Atlantic, Tianna Anderson realized that every storm she had endured had been leading her to this moment, the calm, the confession, and the beginning of something real. The weeks that followed the gala shimmered like sunlight after a long storm. For the first time in years, the Jeffery mansion no longer echoed with conflict. The newspapers had moved on from the scandal, investors had regained confidence, and Christian Jeffery seemed lighter, as though the weight of generations had finally fallen from his shoulders. And for Tianna Anderson, life had found a rhythm she once thought impossible. Her mother was strong enough to walk again, Grandma Ruth was recovering beautifully, and the woman who once scrubbed classrooms at night now prepared for her university graduation, top of her class. The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and golden, the Lagos skyline gleaming beneath a cloudless sky. Tianna stood before her mirror, smoothing the creases in her robe, her heart fluttering wildly. "Mama," she whispered, smiling at her reflection. "We made it." Mama Grace appeared at the doorway, her wrapper neatly tied, her smile trembling with pride. "You did, my child. You never stopped believing, even when everything seemed impossible." Tears filled Tianna's eyes as she hugged her mother tightly. "I did it for you. You were my strength." By mid-morning, the university's grand auditorium overflowed with students, proud parents, and flashing cameras. Banners of navy and gold fluttered across the stage as the dean called names one by one. When Tianna Anderson echoed through the speakers, the applause that followed was thunderous. She walked across the stage, her chin lifted, the gold medal around her neck gleaming under the lights. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of despair had led to this. As she took her seat, she noticed a quiet ripple move through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Her heart skipped a beat. Standing at the back of the hall, dressed not in his usual tailored tuxedo, but in a simple charcoal gray suit, was Christian Jeffery. His presence alone commanded the room, but his gaze was fixed only on her. "Isn't that," someone whispered, "the Christian Jeffery?" "He came for her?" another murmured. Tianna's pulse raced. What is he doing here? The ceremony concluded with the dean's final words about perseverance and legacy. As the audience rose in applause, Christian began to walk down the aisle. Unhurried, steady, his eyes never leaving hers. Each step felt like a promise. When he reached her, the room fell into a hush. Cameras flashed, students gasped, and before Tianna could fully understand what was happening, he went down on one knee. Time stopped. He opened a small velvet box. Inside, a delicate diamond ring caught the light like a captured star. His voice was low but carried through the silence. "No contracts," he said softly. "No conditions. Only love." Her breath caught. Tears welled up instantly, blurring her vision. "Christian," she whispered, trembling. "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted gently, "because I spent months pretending this feeling didn't exist. I hate how we began. But Tianna, I love how far we've come. You taught me what it means to live with purpose, to love with courage. You're the storm that changed everything and the calm that followed." For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then with tears streaming freely down her cheeks, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes." The hall erupted into applause and cheers. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks as Christian slipped the ring onto her trembling hand. She laughed through her tears, covering her face as her classmates screamed and clapped. At the back of the hall, Grandma Ruth dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, beaming with quiet pride. Beside her, Mama Grace whispered a prayer of gratitude. When Christian stood, Tianna threw her arms around him, and the crowd melted into the background. In that moment, the billionaire and the girl who had once begged for help at a pharmacy were simply two souls who had survived every storm to find one another. Their wedding was small but breathtaking, a private ceremony at the Jeffery estate in Ikoyi. The gardens were transformed into a paradise of white orchids and gold lights, their glow reflected in the lagoon beyond. Only close family, friends, and a few trusted colleagues attended. Christian wore a crisp white tuxedo, simple yet commanding. Tianna's gown flowed like sunlight, a soft satin that shimmered with every step. When she walked down the aisle, holding her mother's hand, Christian's eyes filled with emotion he didn't bother to hide. Grandma Ruth, now healthy and radiant, sat proudly in the front row. "She's everything I prayed for," she whispered to Henry beside her. The vows were intimate and honest. Christian's voice broke slightly as he said, "From the first night I saw you standing under that pharmacy light, I knew you were different. You gave when you had nothing. You saw me when I hid behind power. I promised to protect your heart for the rest of my life." Tianna's reply came through a tearful smile. "And I promise never to let the storms of the past define what we build. Because love isn't about where we start. It's about who we become together." When they exchanged rings, applause rippled softly through the garden. The sunset painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, and as Christian kissed her, the first stars appeared above the lagoon. Weeks later, life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Their love story, once whispered as scandal, had become a quiet legend, proof that grace could grow from broken beginnings. Tianna and Christian launched the Ruth Grace Foundation, named after the two women who had shaped their lives. The foundation provided scholarships for underprivileged students and medical aid for single mothers. It was their way of giving back to the city that had tested and transformed them. One late afternoon, they visited one of the charity's new centers on the outskirts of Lagos. Children ran across the courtyard, their laughter filling the air. Christian knelt beside a small boy who proudly showed him a book, while Tianna helped a group of girls paint a mural on the wall. Bright colors spelling out, "Hope lives here." As they walked through the compound hand in hand, Tianna turned to him. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Christian smiled. "Every day. And every time I wonder how I ever lived before you." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "We were broken people trying to survive. Now look at us. We're building something that lasts." He stopped walking, turning her gently toward him. "No, Tianna," he said softly. "You're the one who built me." The wind stirred the trees as the sun dipped low, bathing them in golden light. Around them, laughter and joy rippled through the air, echoes of the life they had created. Christian lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her ring finger. From pain came purpose. From desperation came love. "You are my forever." Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "And you are my peace after the storm." Together they stood there beneath the Lagos sunset, the city alive around them, the future wide open before them. In the distance, the foundation's sign gleamed proudly. The Ruth Grace Foundation, where hope begins again. And hand in hand, Christian Jeffery and Tianna Anderson walked forward, proof that from broken beginnings can rise a legacy of love that never ends.